Episode 4, Chapter 3, Living with Eyes Closed. Chapter 3, Living is Easy with Eyes Closed. In a ruined castle, far in the wilderness, creatures of darkness held court. Once, they had been elves, but their bodies were foul and twisted, distorted by the evil magic they had fallen prey to. The worst of them all, the one called King, sat upon a grandiose throne and leered down at them, basking in the glory of their adoration. His enjoyment was broken as a cloud of darkness appeared in the air near the throne room ceiling, coalescing out of nothingness before drifting down to his level. One of the stupider monsters charged to attack it. A moment later, he was blown back as blades of wind tore the flesh from his bones and propelled it into the far wall with a wet splat.
You may want to consider upping the intelligence level required for entering your service, Astos.
The darkness advised.
They will not be much use to you like that, after all.
The one on the throne winced at her words as well as the mess.
Quite the opposite, really. That'll be a pain to clean up.
He straightened up.
Forgive mine rude gentry, Lady Tiamat. I shall take great pains in educating them to avoid a reoccurrence of such unpleasant behavior.
Something in the darkness twitched that might almost have been an amused smirk at Astos' grandiose manner of speech.
Well, that is why they're not in charge, I suppose. Indeed.
Astos agreed.
It would be quite boring if everybody was on the same intellectual level as our kind, Lady Tiamat.
He glanced around at the few remaining dark elves and snorted.
What are you lot still doing here? Leave, already. The Fiend of Air and I have business to discuss.
They scrambled away quickly.
Indeed. Even among my company, Carrie in particular seems to be somewhat dense. And Kraken has been failing to impress me lately as well.
Tiamat murmured, watching the dark elves scatter.
I hope that fool was not necessary for anything.
Astos waved a hand dismissively.
Nothing at all. I can't even remember his name, though I think the smell will remain with me for some time now.
He sighed and slouched on his throne now that all his subjects had left him.
Enough small talk, milady. I don't believe you're the sort to drop by and visit just on a whim. Is there a way I may be of service to you? Indeed there is.
Tiamat paused before continuing on.
Are you aware of what transpired a little under 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks?
Astos thought back.
I seem to remember feeling some sort of disturbance around that time, though I'm not sure what it was. Would that be what you refer to? It would have to be.
The Fiend of Air hissed.
The Chaos Knight is dead.
It took a moment for Astos to understand the significance of those words. Slowly, his hands began to shake.
Garland was killed.
He whispered.
How could Garland die? He's him. His power had waned.
Tiamat explained.
It has been centuries since he was in his prime. It would have happened sooner or later. More important is the cause of his death. It was carried out by 4 very specific individuals. It seems the Light Warriors have finally come. They're real.
Astos gasped.
You mean? Those old fools were right? That prophecy? All of it is real.
Tiamat rolled her eyes.
Yes, it's real.
She confirmed, forcing herself not to add an insult onto the end of that.
They are real. And they killed Garland. And yet, even with his weakened power, they were barely able to manage that. They are all young. And nowhere near their full potential. I would prefer it if they were disposed of before they become anywhere near that. Unfortunately, they are not close enough to any of us for us to be able to deal with them personally. Even our power is limited by range. At the moment, Carrie and Kraken seem unconcerned with this matter. And you already know of Lich's difficulties.
She broke off as the entire castle around them suddenly began shaking tumultuously, rocked by mighty tremors that ripped through the ground it rested on. After about a minute, it subsided, leaving the ancient castle surprisingly intact considering the rotting condition of it.
Well now, it seems despite that, Lich has decided to do something about this. That was the Fiend of Earth, then?
Astos inquired, slightly pale, and Tiamat nodded.
Indeed it was. I'm not quite sure what it was he did, but it was definitely him. And there's only one thing that he'd be moving that much force around for. I doubt it was a direct assault, but whatever it was, it should make their journey more troubling. And that, Sir Astos, is what I came here to discuss with you today.
Astos' black eyes widened as he realized her point.
You wish for me to deal with the Light Warriors, Lady Tiamat? That is exactly what I wish, Astos.
She confirmed.
But...
Astos looked around himself in confusion.
But I couldn't leave here. My subjects are here. My castle. My kingdom. All of that. It's here. I couldn't leave that. Couldn't leave my crown.
He trailed off, muttering to himself.
My crown. Mine. It's mine. My right, my birthright, my crown. I am the king.
Tiamat's cloud of darkness expanded in anger, then relaxed as she reminded herself that this dolt was still useful to her, even if he was like this.
I never said you had to, Astos.
She told him patiently once his attention was back on her again.
However, there is a good chance the Light Warriors may be coming into your territory. If they come to Elfland, I assume that you can arrange to make their stay difficult? Especially considering one of their number is one of those you hate the most.
Slowly, horribly, Astos smiled.
If they come here, I can make sure they regret it. Especially that one. An elf, you say? One of the good elves.
The deranged creature made a rude noise.
Yes, if they come to me, I shall greatly enjoy what will come to pass as a result of that. It shall be as you wish, Lady Tiamat. Just make sure they don't leave. I don't care how long it takes or how painful you make it, just as long as it's permanent.
She admonished him, then gave in and smiled, showing the utter disdain for all life that filled her.
With that in mind, feel free to enjoy yourself. Oh, I will.
Astos caught the smile and what it meant, but was not disturbed in the slightest.
I may not be someone. Something. Quite like your number, milady. But I still love to hear them scream. If I can hear it from where I am, I may just find myself indebted to you, Astos.
The Fiend of Air suggested.
I'll be watching.
And then she faded away, and the air was calm and quiet once more until the wind returned, howling through the holes in the forgotten castle.
Arg! You're up already? And lookin' right cheerful too. Ain't right.
Bicky grumbled as he and his crew met the Light Warriors out in front of the Viking's head. The pirates had ended up drinking so much that they had passed out in the tavern. After discussing it, the Light Warriors had gone to stay in an inn. By that time, the story had gone around town about what they had done and the grateful innkeeper had let them stay for a reduced price. Now that the sun was rising, they had returned to find Bicky and his crew slowly staggering up. The former captain absently filched one last jar of ale, stretched, and stumbled out onto the street.
All right. Crescent Lake, you said? That's the place.
Luke nodded, still not really accustomed to the boisterous Bicky.
You know how to get there, of course. I'd bet my boat on it if I hadn't lost it already.
Bicky promised, leading the way down to the dock.
It'll take a while, but we can still get there months ahead of the overland route. First we'll have to head through the Aldi Straits to get out into the ocean proper. After that we'll just head around to the southeast. I've done it plenty of times.
He winked at a passing man, who blanched.
Lovely city you got here, matey. I'll have to come back sometime now that I'm reformed and all that.
He glanced at Luke.
About that. You do know that I got a price on me head through most of the world, right? I heard something about that, yeah.
Luke shrugged.
If it comes up, just say you're working for us. Far as I know, just about every monarchy around is cooperating on this. Good to know.
Bicky nodded, then looked up at his ship as they approached it.
Ah, me lovely Amphitrite. She's an old sea cow, but still a good one. She'll take ye anywhere you'll want to go, don't worry. Ahoy! Smite, you drunk off your arse or what? Get down here. Only when you order me to be, Captain.
A huge, bald man in black leather jumped over the side and landed effortlessly. He looked to be almost 7 feet tall, bulging with muscles, and wearing an eye patch just like Bicky, though a scar through it hinted that his was genuine. He looked the light warriors over and frowned.
Who are these blokes, Captain? Helmsman, actually, Smite.
Bicky corrected him.
Got myself demoted, I'm afraid. Fellas, this here is Mr. Smite, former first mate under me.
Now Smite was grimacing.
Something I should know about. Helmsman. Eh?
Bicky chuckled nervously.
I kinda. Well. Bet the ship that these four couldn't hua up our 9 boyos.
He indicated the pirates behind him.
Ye can probably tell who won that fight. And the bet.
Smite sighed.
I told you that you would gamble yourself into trouble one day, Bicky. What am I going to do with you?
He glanced at the others.
Well, if he's helmsman now, I guess I'm the bosun. Mr. Smite, at your service. I take it you're the captain now?
He asked of Luke, who shrugged.
These 3 seem to insist on calling me their leader, so I suppose so.
Luke agreed.
Which one of you wants to be first mate?
Mary and Vlad both glanced at Drake, who sighed.
That'd be me, I guess. So are you 2 second and third mate then or what?
Bicky and Smite both winced at that last one, which Mary caught.
Unless you already have a ship's medic, maybe I should handle that.
Bicky nodded quickly.
We've never had a medic before, whatever that is. So sure. And you can be second mate if you don't want something else, Straw Hat. Whatever.
Vlad began to climb a rope onto the ship.
We're heading to Crescent Lake, Smite.
Bicky explained as the others followed him up.
These 4 yahoos are calling themselves the Light Warriors. Say they're taken on the fiends. I figure it's just crazy enough to try.
Smite looked at them with something that might almost have been approval.
You picked the right crew then, mates. I'm the only one on this entire ship with even an ounce of good sense, and even I love a good fight. One time I had to talk Bicky here out of taking on a hurricane. I still say I woulda won.
Bicky grumbled as he took his place at the wheel.
Explain the deal to those that weren't there, Smite. Right.
The huge man went below decks.
Raise the anchor.
Bicky yelled as his pirates complied.
Get that sail movin', we're headin' to Crescent Lake. Let's go, me hearties.
He winked at the light warriors.
Feel free to take your time gettin' used to sea life, mateys. Just don't lose your weapons. The high seas are dangerous, don't you know? It'll be nice to have tough fellas like you on hand for the fightin', lemme tell ya. Right.
Luke nodded.
We'll be ready.
Mary and Drake began exploring the ship, curious, while Vlad simply slouched against the mast, watching Bicky. The first fight came around midday. Without warning, a swarm of screeching, blue-scaled humanoids burst out of the ocean, led by a red one.
Arg, Sahaghin!
Bicky bellowed, dropping the wheel and drawing his cutlasses.
Let's get 'em, mates. Right.
Luke sliced one in half, then turned to another while Bicky himself engaged the red leader. Drake grappled with a pair, while Mary dashed at another, swinging her hammer. Shrieking, the Sahag jumped aside, then slashed at her with vicious claws. She stumbled back, and it advanced, only to meet a much larger hammer that sent its mangled remains flying overboard. Checking it, Smite looked down at her.
You okay? I'll live.
Mary healed herself, wincing.
Sahagins' greatest skill are their agility. Be glad we're not fighting them in the water.
The bald man grunted, smashing another, then suddenly freezing before toppling over.
He's stunned.
Mary realized.
What? A big eye.
One pirate yelled.
Somebody get it, quick.
Some strange, tentacled beast that seemed to consist mostly of two huge, bulging eyeballs was crawling out of the sea onto the ship's deck. As it was about to pull itself up entirely, blue magic coalesced about it, and the water covering the beast froze, pulling it down into the depths.
Got it.
Vlad smirked, turning to watch Bicky. Finishing their last opponents, the others did as well. The red Sahag was a great deal both stronger and more agile than the others, jumping and flipping and striking like a ninja. But Bicky was even faster. Despite his unsteady balance, every move he made was deliberate and perfectly aimed, deflecting every attempt his foe made to injure him and replying with vicious strikes of his own. Finally, seeing that all the other Sahaghin had been disposed of, he spun around, backflipped clear over his enemy and sliced its head off, then spin-kicked it overboard in the same motion. Catching the head on his sword, he bowed flamboyantly.
You know, suddenly I'm awful glad he didn't join in back in the tavern.
Luke muttered. Drake nodded emphatically.
Definitely. We might have been able to take him between the four of us, but... Bicky's a tough customer, all right.
Smite agreed, recovering from his stunning.
Though you fellas aren't bad at all either. And you look like you've been in the business for a lot less time than us old sea dogs.
He glanced at Mary.
I hope you don't mind if I give you a little instruction with that, though, missy. A hammer doesn't have to be all brute force.
Mary smiled.
I'd appreciate it, Mr. Smite. Are those things common around here?
Drake inquired, cleaning scales and blood off of his sword.
Oh, yeah. They're all over the place.
Bicky spat on the deck.
The worst of the lot live down at the bottom of the sea. Those red ones. A few of those come up here to lead the guppies. They're more of a nuisance than a real threat, although the pets they keep sometimes are another story. Like that big eye you took out, Straw Hat, or sometimes sharks. Adventure on the high seas seems to be a fairly hazardous profession.
Drake noted dryly.
Fun, though.
Bicky winked.
All right you swabbies, party's over. Back to work.
It was nighttime, almost a week aboard ship later. Bicky and his crew had raised no argument when Luke had explained that they all liked to sleep under the stars, and surprisingly, there hadn't been any accidental disturbances of their sleep quarters either. Moreover, there had been no issues with the food either. For some reason, the cutthroats were being true to their former captain's word. Bicky himself and Smite had both remained amiable as well, and the voyage had been almost pleasant, broken only by the fights that came several times a day. The most unpleasant realization had been that the sharks kept by the Sahaghin had been trained to actually leap out of the water over the entire ship. Still, they had all survived so far, and according to Bicky would reach the Aldi Strait the next days.
Looks like no trouble tonight,
Luke noted as he looked over the side of the rail. It was his night to take some time at the watch while Vlad caught his few needed hours of sleep, and while on the ship he assisted the pirates' night watchman in looking out for Sahaghin as well.
Wonder how long Vlad'll be sleeping tonight. Seems like it's almost been 3 hours.
He glanced down at the slumbering black mage. The young fighter was completely unprepared for what happened next. Eyes snapping open, Vlad jerked to his feet, screaming.
Ugh! Stop it! Please, stop!
Running forward, he hurled himself over the rail as Drake and Mary bolted upright as well, roused by his screams. Luke leaned over, staring.
Vlad, what are you doing? I'm on fire!
The black mage yelled back, frenzied. Luke blinked. There was no trace of even the slightest bit of flames on his friend's robes as he thrashed around in the waves.
No, you're not.
Drake echoed his thoughts aloud.
You were dreaming, man. It's okay.
Slowly, Vlad's strokes became more certain, and he paddled over to a rope, climbing it up.
Ahoy, matey!
The pirate on watch had been attracted by the noise as well.
You okay? Hell of a time to go swimmin'. I'm fine.
Vlad muttered as he clambered on board again, sounding almost embarrassed.
It was just a bad dream, like Drake said. Must have been.
Mary agreed, eyes sympathetic.
You're okay now, though. It's been going on for 18 years. If nothing else, I'm used to it.
The black mage informed her curtly. The watch pirate shrugged.
Whatever, mate. Just try and keep it down, yeah? Good thing the others are all below. Mr. Smite gets irritable if he's woken up early. You can get some sleep now, Luke.
Vlad informed him.
I won't be going back to that tonight.
Luke started to ask another question, then gave in and laid down again.
Yeah, okay.
After a moment Drake and Mary followed suit. Several hours later, they rose again to find Vlad sitting on the ship's prow, looking out through the morning fog.
You're awake, I see,
he said without turning.
And yes, I'm still fine, so don't ask. We may have a problem, though. Hopefully Bicky will be up soon so I can ask him about it. Ask me about what, mate?
Bicky asked as he stumbled out onto the deck, scratching his beard. Mr. Smite followed him, yawning.
Something up. You could say that.
Vlad agreed.
The only way to take a ship out of the Aldi Sea is through the strait, right? Yeah.
Smite nodded.
The rest of the sea's landlocked except for the rivers around Crescent Lake, and those are far too small to take this old sea cow through. What's the problem? That.
Vlad pointed ahead of them as the fog cleared. Squinting, they could see the outline of the straits ahead of them. And then they saw the problem. A massive uprising of stone that had come out of the ocean, completely blocking the strait. Bicky walked forward, standing on the ship's rail, staring at it. He flipped his eye patch up. His jaw worked silently. Finally, he snapped.
"What the bloody hell is that supposed to be?"
the pirate bellowed before flinging himself at it in fury. Swimming over to the barricade with surprising speed, he lunged at it with both swords, hacking and slashing wildly.
"Out of my way, you stupid piece of shite! Out, damn it! Arg! This just ain't freakin' right, shark! There's a shark here! Come here, you! Grrr! What? Ya got a buddy too? Bring it on!"
One bloody fight later, Bicky emerged with the fish's heads. Giving up on the barricade, he swam back to ship and came back aboard.
"Well, hell! Looks like we got a change of plans, mates." "We noticed,"
Drake deadpanned.
"How the heck do we get around that? Any ideas?" "There's a dwarf cavern near here,"
Mr. Smite answered, still glaring at the wall.
"We can go there, and hopefully get some answers in regard to this. We stop by there sometimes when passin' through here anyways to pick up supplies."
Bicky scratched himself absent-mindedly.
"And we've actually managed to refrain from knockin' it over even once, so they won't be greetin' us with loaded catapults or anythin'." "That would be nice,"
Drake chuckled.
"Having your sail set on fire is just never a good way to start the day, no matter how you look at it. And it slops tar on your decks, too,"
Bicky agreed sagely.
"Right, the harbor's only a bit a ways."
He peered down into the waters.
"Might as well pull up the rest of those sharks for breakfast, Smite."
After eating, they docked at the harbor, and continued on into the nearby mountain cavern.
"Dwarves, huh?"
Luke looked around the inside of the huge underground domain.
"Haven't met many of them before."
The earthen people were one of the 3 civilized species that still remained in contact with the others, but were easily less common than humans or elves. They seemed to have no real kingdoms or territories that they stuck to. Small communities of the Dwarven could be found in caverns the world over. The pirates knew their way around, so the light warriors followed along as they headed down the sloping path along the cavern wall to the floor, where bearded dwarves in hard hats prepared for their daily mining.
"We get a few passing through Elfland now and then."
Drake shrugged, wincing at a particularly unsafe-looking structural design.
"I don't know how these guys do this. I keep feeling like the ceiling's gonna fall in at any moment." "It may not seem like it, but dwarves are architectural masters,"
Mary assured him.
"There are a few caverns like this around Gaia, so we met our fair share of them growing up." "Hoy, Smith!"
Mr. Smite yelled at a passing dwarf in greeting.
"What the hell's up with that mess in the straits, eh?" "Oh, ya saw that, did ya?"
The addressed dwarf turned, scowling.
"Yeah, that's a right slag heap. Y'all want to see Nirik, he's down at the south end workin' on that right now." Right.
Bicky nodded and continued on, threading his way through the lanes and turns with the practiced ease of one who had been through the area many times. Eventually, they came up against the southern wall of the cavern, where a long tunnel extended unnaturally into a dead end. There, they found a burly dwarf whose hair and beard had both dulled to white with age, swearing rather creatively. As they approached, he turned to glare at them.
"I'm busy here, yeah, it's ya too. And some new friends,
He squinted at the light warriors.
"Ya don't look like the type to be pirates. Bet there's a story behind that, eh?" "There sure is,"
Luke admitted.
"Maybe we'll tell it to ya over some ale later on,"
Bicky continued.
"First things first, though, I hear ya can tell us about that garbage block in the strait." "Yeah."
Nirik's eyes darkened.
"About a week back, this huge earthquake comes tearing through here, and when we go out to check that thing had popped up. The quake came from the direction of Melmond, so some of the boyos are Callan Lich. And even I've gotta say it don't look natural. Course if it was, there's still the question of why Lich went and did it. I've got a few ideas.
Bicky muttered, suddenly dead serious as he looked at the light warriors.
Question, fellas. Do they know you're coming? Could be.
Luke answered honestly.
The whole thing's pretty well known, so it wouldn't surprise me. Especially since right before we met you, we took out a punk who was rumored to work for them. Humph. Well, we can't do anything about that, I guess.
Mr. Smite reasoned.
The important thing is how we can fix this problem. Until that thing's gone, we're not leaving the Aldec.
At that, Nirik shook himself out of the stare he had been locked in ever since Bicky had asked his question.
That must be some story.
He mused.
Anyways, I'm working on that right now. It looks bad, though. Work in undersea is the worst. The best we'll be able to do at getting it out is half a year. We can't wait that long.
Luke decided firmly.
We'll have to find some other way. Unless you got high explosives, like TNT, or something, that's the only way the strait's getting clear.
Nirik replied just as firmly. Mary sighed.
And nobody's known how to make TNT for hundreds of years, so we're out of luck there.
Her voice dropped off as she saw the look on Luke's face.
What is it? TNT.
The fighter tapped a finger against his jaw.
That's Lefinish, right?
Mary and Vlad exchanged glanced before the latter nodded.
Correct.
A lost civilization, the Lefinish were an incredibly advanced people who had lived in the northeast until the coming of Tiamat, who they had been foolish enough to challenge and had been eradicated for.
Why? Because there's an old room in the castle back at Corneria with some Lefinish treasures in it, and I think I recall hearing that one of them might be some TNT.
Luke explained.
Only problem is, the room was locked by another treasure. The mystic key. That's my royal family's thing.
Drake remembered.
Couple centuries back, right when the fiends gained total control, the king at the time went around and hid stashes like that all over, using the key to lock 'em up. It's enchanted so that nothing else can get in there. Real powerful magic. I hear the king still has it. So if we go to Elfland, get this key, and use it to open the vault in Corneria, we can get this TNT and use it to clear the way.
Mary reasoned it all out.
Sounds like the straight of it, lassie.
Nirik agreed.
Alrighty then, to Elfland we go.
Bicky nodded decisively.
Tomorrow, if it's alright by ya, boss? Ya don't mind if we take one day to socialize with some old pals, right?
Luke smiled tolerantly.
Fine by me. Guys.
The other light warriors nodded as well.
Alrighty, as long as you show us around. Deal.
Bicky cackled.
First things first. This way to the pubs. Alright, now here, we've got to be careful.
Bicky explained as he steered his ship into a harbor on the coast of Elfland.
Dwarves are one thing, but the elven monarchies had quite a few reasons to relieve me of me head for some years now, and they're the types that don't let go of old grudges as the years pass. Nothing personal, lad.
He inclined his head towards Drake.
No problem.
Drake leaned against the rail.
Out of curiosity, what would those warrants be for? Oh, the usual. Piracy of course, a little robbery, standard assault and battery, assorted murders, some extortion, a few incidental arsons, bit of highway robbery on the way back one night, extensive smuggling plus a count of cattle rustling one time. We forgot to pick up rations, a dash of burglary a couple times we got bored, and as a Phoenician touch, being drunk in the presence of the royal family.
Vicky rattled off absently.
Oh yeah, and I think technically one count of accidental barratry too. Your people actually made a formal law against being drunk in the royal family's presence?
Mary asked Drake, smirking a bit.
Oh yeah, definitely.
The elf waved that off.
What I'm wondering is how you were in the royal family's presence. It was a technicality. Some third cousin or something.
Vicky explained as he walked over to the anchor and kicked it overboard.
Speaking of that incident, would ya happen to know if puking on the royal family is a separate offense, or is it filed under the drunk one? I think that's the same law.
Drake winced.
You didn't kill him, did you? Nah, he was yellin' too much to be dead.
The pirate reasoned.
All right, you know how to get to the capital from here, mate? You four can go on ahead, then. Wouldn't be a good idea for me and the boys to stroll right in there, so we'll just hang out here until you finish your business and come back. The harbor master's another story. He's kind of an old friend of mine if I happen to have a few coins on hand, which I do. Think ye can pick up some of the port they got there while you're at it? I'll make sure to grab some.
Luke promised, jumping overboard. As his friends joined him, he turned to Drake.
So, you're the native expert now. What do we need to look out for? Well, we got the nasty wolves here too. Asps and giant spiders too.
The elf explained.
Mostly, though, the main thing to watch out for are ogres and creep. This is where most of them live. We'll almost certainly run into some on our way to the capital. It's a one-day walk from here. Great.
Luke sighed.
Well, more heads to turn in for bounty payments. Cash increase is always good, I guess. That's assuming we can figure out what part of a creep is the head.
Drake cracked, then sobered.
One addition to the wildlife analysis: to the west there's a festering pit called the Marsh Cave. I don't know what the hell is wrong with the place, but the monsters in there are seriously bad news. Everybody in the country gives that place a wide berth, so whatever we do, let's make sure to do that as well. Well, we're only here to get the mystic key from the royal family, so we won't be going anywhere near that.
Mary reminded him, and he visibly relaxed.
True, true. Just wanted to get that out. So what happens if we come back here and find that our new friends have sailed off without us?
Vlad wondered.
We commandeer the next ship that comes by. It should only be a few days.
Drake shrugged.
I think there's at least a fair chance that Vicky will play it straight, though. He didn't try anything dirty while we were at sea. Perhaps the fiends will all commit suicide too.
Vlad muttered.
It's about as likely. Still more likely than you cheering up.
Drake shot back.
Right, if you smell anything really bad, prepare for battle. Let's go.
Ignoring further mumbled insults from Vlad, he led the way into the dense forest ahead. Unlike the terrain of Corn area, Elfland was solidly covered with trees, and more trees. The woods loomed around them all day until they reached the capital, and it was evident that they extended even further beyond the clearing around the city. As Drake had predicted, ogres and creep made themselves known several times. The latter could only be described as festering piles of flesh, but the ogres were much worse, 8-foot, pink-skinned humanoids wearing primitive furs and swinging wooden clubs. Only Luke's strength and Vlad's magic could pose any threat at all, and both were exhausted when they reached Elfland.
Right, should we get a room at the inn first, or stop by at the castle.
Luke puffed. Mary looked at him and her brother, who was silently drooping and leaning against a fence, and shook her head.
We can see the royal family tomorrow. You two need rest. Yes, brother, I know you can't get much anyways, but you need to try. Drake, where's an inn? An inn. A good one.
Drake looked around.
Probably around the west side of town.
He blinked.
Which we're already at. So, right around here. You're not sure?
Luke frowned, confused.
Thought this was your hometown. Yeah, well.
Drake looked down at the road.
It's, been a while. Yeah. Anyways. Here's one called the Silver Owl. I remember it having a good representative.
They walked inside, and the elf at the desk squinted at them.
Travelers from afar. And one native?
He gave Drake a disapproving look.
I assume you'll want separate rooms, unless the lady.
He left it hanging.
Separate rooms will be fine.
Mary stated firmly.
Very well.
The elf nodded.
100 gold for 4 rooms, please.
They paid up and went to the taproom, ordering dinner and the usual drinks.
He didn't seem to recognize you.
Mary noted as their portions of deer were delivered. Drake shrugged, carving into his.
Most of the people here tend not to take too much interest in affairs outside their own lives. If you ask them on the street, they'd all say they support the light warriors fully, but they'd never know we are them. Cultural flaw, I guess. Not much we can do about it unless you want to whip out the orbs and parade around holding them above our heads. Entertaining as that sounds, I think we'll pass.
Luke chuckled.
So we'll hit the palace tomorrow. Then the shops, I guess. I picked up a short sword while in Provoca, but it never hurts to see what else is available. Elven magic too.
Vlad agreed, eyes lighting up slightly.
Yeah, well, just remember what I said about the prices.
Drake reminded them.
Chances are we'll have to go track down some more ogres if we want to go on a real shopping spree. Hopefully we'll at least be able to afford some things to make killing them slightly easier for us.
Mary winced.
The ones we met on the way here wore us out. Yeah, but now we know how to deal with them.
Luke bragged.
Round 2'll be a different story. This from the guy who's nearly falling out of his chair.
Drake kidded him.
Let's turn in early tonight, I agree.
Mary nodded.
You two need your rest. If you insist.
Luke stood.
We'll leave you two alone, then. Just don't take too long before coming up, or we might start to get ideas.
Grinning, he left, and Vlad stood as well, eyes narrowed.
Don't try anything.
He advised Drake before departing as well. Drake and Mary glanced at each other, then simultaneously shook their heads and laughed.
Does he always get like that?
Drake asked after they had control of themselves again.
With you and other guys, I mean. This is the first time I've seen it.
Mary admitted.
Although he seems to have taken a dislike to you, unfortunately. It's probably just an extension of that combined with Luke's joke that's put him on edge. I hope so. This is going to be a very long journey if he's spending more time watching me than the enemies. Or, alternatively, a very short one.
The elf reasoned, and Mary smiled again.
You always have a joke ready, don't you? I try.
Drake sighed.
One of the first things I learned. It's hard to laugh and cry at the same time. Some levity can always help a bad situation, even if only a little. And sometimes you've got to take every bit you can get. You sound like you had a lot of those growing up.
Mary noted, smile disappearing.
But this looks like a beautiful city. Even nicer than Corneria or Gaia's capitals. Even so, you're uncomfortable here? I can tell. Something's wrong. What is it? Heh.
Closing his eyes, Drake chuckled, lightly and without humor.
You're very observant, my friend. But I'm sorry, but I really don't want to talk about it. It's nothing important, anyways. We're not going to be here for long, so why dredge up ancient history? All right. I won't pry.
The white mage gave in.
I wish you would tell me about it, but it's your call.
She stood up.
We should probably turn in as well. Yeah. Big day tomorrow.
Drake agreed. The two of them walked upstairs and parted without another word, the silence hanging between them like a wall, and closed their doors, leaving what had passed between them behind.
The Light Warriors, you say?
The elven guard looked at the four heroes suspiciously.
Well, you do match the descriptions from the reports. You have the orbs, of course. Of course.
Drake pulled his out, and after a moment the others did as well.
Can't get much more identifying than this, bucko. Now then, how about showing us to the royal family, We've got business with them.
The guard's face darkened, and for a moment it seemed he would respond hotly, but instead he turned and stalked off. The light warriors followed him into the castle of Elf, an even older edifice than Corneria's keep. Unlike the human castle, it was not built for warlike purposes. This castle was more ceremonial, built for appearances, and thus the designers had sacrificed defense for beauty. Instead of covered halls, the pathways of the castle were often open on one side to the many interior gardens and parks filled with the same trees that covered the entire kingdom, growing majestically along with the castle as if they were a part of it. Eventually, the guard brought them to a room in the southwest corner, where an elderly elf with a trim beard was sitting behind a desk.
Chancellor Jillian, the Light Warriors wish to speak with the royal family.
The guard explained.
The Light Warriors.
The apparent chancellor looked them over.
Humph. Return to your post. I will deal with this.
Nodding, the guard departed.
Nothing personal, sir, but this isn't really the kind of thing that can be dealt with offhand.
Luke told the old elf diplomatically.
We really need to see the royal family. I'm afraid that would be quite impossible, sir. Luke, correct.
Jillian pursed his lips.
There is a problem. One that so far has been kept to this castle. Due to your rather unique status, however, I think I will have to accept your word of secrecy on this matter. It relates directly to your request. If it is necessary.
Mary sighed.
I swear it.
The other three followed suit, and Jillian nodded.
Very well. As Sir Drake doubtless knows.
He inclined his head stiffly towards the younger elf.
For the past several years, the royal family have not appeared in public. As a matter of fact, nobody at all has seen them save for myself. So far, we have been able to keep the kingdom running despite this. There is a reason for this method. It is in the throne room, behind this chamber.
Standing, he unlocked a door in the rear of the room and led them into the throne room. Though it would normally be illuminated by massive windows, all were draped in dark curtains now. The room's only inhabitant sat on the throne, eyes closed. It was an elf who looked to be slightly older than the 4 light warriors, clad in deep green robes. Gillian bowed before him before looking back to them.
Behold! The Prince of Elfland. Magic here. Something foul.
Mary detected, and Vlad nodded in agreement.
It's a sleep spell. But far, far more powerful and complex than any I could pull off. What happened here? And where's the king?
Drake asked as well, eyes narrowing.
I don't like the feel of this. Not one bit. Indeed you should not.
Gillian took a deep breath, eyes in the past.
5 years ago, the Dark Elves attacked this castle. Led by their leader, Astos, they assaulted us with the intention of killing the royal family and placing their chieftain on the throne. Dark Elves?
Luke inquired, glancing at Drake.
Traitors. Elves who have gone over to the black arts. Not as in offensive magic like you, Vlad. Evil so twisted it mutates their bodies.
Drake shuddered.
They're even more dangerous than the ogres. Supposedly, most of them lurk in the forests to the west, around the marsh cave. Not too near, though. About the only thing good that can be said about that place is that it's even more toxic to dark elves than normal people. The gases in there are fatal to whatever it is they've become.
He flushed suddenly.
Sorry, Chancellor. Didn't mean to interrupt. Please continue. Yes, well.
Gillian coughed.
As I was saying, the common people are led to believe that the royal family was injured heavily and have spent the past few years recovering in solitude. The court healers and, indeed, all others who work in the castle, have kept the truth secret. In reality, Astos' attack was far more successful. The prince you stand before now is all that remains of the royal family. The rest were all slain. Including the king. No way.
Drake whispered, awestruck.
The king is dead? All the family? And this was 5 years ago? Nobody knew. That was exactly what we wanted.
The Chancellor informed him somberly.
When we finally ran Astos and his filthy minions off, we discovered the prince like this, and the rest of his family dead. For some reason, Astos cast this spell upon him instead of killing him like the rest. This state of order is necessary until the prince awakens and can be made king of Elfland. But alas, he has slept for 5 years and shows no signs of awakening. Then, there's nobody who can tell us where the mystic key is.
Luke slowly realized.
The mystic key? No.
Gillian confirmed.
The prince doubtless knows, but he cannot speak. I assume that is the object of your visit. Yeah.
Drake admitted.
But it looks like that's not going to work. Now hold on there a moment.
Luke disagreed.
It's still not impossible. We'll just have to wake the prince up. This Astos guy. He's still around, right? And we know where the dark elves are. So all we have to do is find him. And make him talk.
Vlad agreed, the ghost of an unpleasant smile barely visible beneath his eyes. Drake started to protest, then stopped, his eyes narrowed.
That does seem to be our line of work. I guess it'd still be the fastest way. If you could do this. Rid the kingdom of Astos, and revive our prince. The entire kingdom would be in your debt.
Gillian promised.
I suppose he can't be worse than the fiends.
Mary reasoned.
To the west, you said? Yup.
Drake nodded.
Looks like we're headed out there. Although we should probably go check on Vicky and give him a heads up, let him know what we're doing and all that. We'll want to go north too anyways. Straight west from here would put us far too near the marsh cave for my liking. Is it that bad?
Mary asked, and both elves shuddered.
Young Master Drake is very right in wishing to avoid it,
Jillian assured her.
That foul pit is the stuff of nightmares. Like I said, even dark elves won't go near it. That says it all, I think.
Drake followed up.
Right, we should probably get going before it gets any later. We'll want to go shopping before we head back.
Nodding to the Chancellor, they departed. Later that day, they left the capital city the same way they had entered, wallets groaning in unison. Luke in particular was muttering half-intelligible curses, an outraged look on his face.
4,000 gold for a silver sword. 4,000 freakin' gold for a freakin' silver freakin' sword.
Freakin' was not exactly the word he used.
We put a high value on silver here.
Drake shrugged.
We'll still want to save up and get one for you before we head out. Silver's an inferior metal, I know, but it's more than made up for by how effective it is against creatures of evil, and that definitely includes dark elves. Between that and the prices on magic, we might be killing ogres for a while.
Mary sighed.
Me and Vlad could only afford to learn one new spell each. Good ones, though.
The Black Mage admitted.
Well, it's not like there's a shortage of them.
Drake shrugged.
We'll manage. We always do.
He frowned over at the gate guards, who were paying them no attention and seemed distracted by their own discussions.
Wait. What was that? Hey, you. What were you saying?
The guards slowly turned and sneered at him.
I don't see how it's your business, but if you must know, we were discussing the troop of soldiers that just went north to capture a wanted criminal sighted there.
The light warriors jumped.
What was his name?
Mary asked urgently. The guards blinked, confused for a moment before answering.
Bicky the pirate. Damn.
Luke whirled.
I think we'd better pick up the pace this time, guys.
They made it back to the harbor faster than their last trip and in better condition, and that was a good thing. When they emerged from the forest, a full battalion of elven troops were surrounding the docks. The Amphitrite was a good distance away from shore, but Bicky could be clearly seen on the prow, yelling insults.
With a senile sea troll for chaperone.
He finished, and the apparent commander of the elves raised his arm.
Bowman! Hold it right there!
Luke yelled.
Just what do you think you're doing?
The elven commander turned to regard him coolly.
Apprehending a wanted criminal. The charges are. We already know them, thanks.
Drake interrupted, glaring at the commander.
For the moment, however, this criminal happens to be in our service. You can return to the capital, we have been handling him, and will continue to do so.
A glint of recognition flashed in the commander's eyes as he looked at Drake, and his expression of contempt shifted to a frigid smile.
I don't recall ever taking orders from you before, boy. Why should I start now?
Drake glared back and produced his orb.
See this? This thing right here? It's the Orb of Earth. And it's mine, which means I am one of the Light Warriors. And that, in turn, means that I am one of the 4 people who have been entrusted with the saving of the entire world. I would say that means quite a bit. I serve the Elven Monarchy.
The commander persisted stubbornly.
The Light Warriors have no authority over me, especially not one like you.
Drake inhaled sharply, but before he could respond, 3 other forms stood around him.
The Elven Monarchy supports us.
Luke informed him.
They are respecting our positions. As their servant, you must naturally follow suit. Captain Bicky has also supported us. As a matter of fact, he has sworn his loyalty to us directly.
Mary continued.
Thus, he falls under the same jurisdiction as us. Our own. Do not interfere. Unless you want to test just who and what we are yourself.
Vlad concluded ominously, lightning dancing at his fingers. The commander glared at them for several seconds more before turning around.
Fall in, troops. We're returning to Elfland and seeking orders on this situation from Chancellor Gillian.
The soldiers followed him without comment. Once they were gone, Bicky pulled his ship back in and waited for them to board.
Thanks, mateys.
The pirate gruffly greeted them.
Thought things were tin and nasty there. Looks like we owe you one for running that crew off. Hey, we're pals, right?
Drake shrugged it off.
What happens? What we do for each other. It's only natural. Yeah, I guess.
Bicky agreed, still looking thoughtful.
So, did you get the key?
Mr. Smite asked, changing the subject. Luke shook his head.
Afraid not. We'll be around here for a while longer. We figured we should check in and let you know. Whatever you gotta do.
Bicky shrugged.
We'll be here when you're ready to go. I'll go tell the cook to fry up supper for 4 more, then.
He stomped off below decks with Mr. Smite in tow, and Drake smirked at Vlad.
Somehow, I doubt we'll have to worry about him leaving us from now on. Maybe.
The black mage grunted.
Don't get any ideas, by the way. I still hate you. I just didn't want you getting killed by somebody that pathetic.
He wandered off to lean over the rail, and Drake shook his head.
Whatever, man. You're learning his language, I see.
Mary noted, and the elf smiled a little wider.
Yeah. Imagine that. Few more weeks and the 4 of us might actually resemble a team, huh? We'd better.
Luke agreed.
We've got a lot ahead of us.
End of chapter.